I stepped into the executive dining room and saw Laura Mills leaning close to Michael Grant, my direct supervisor. Between them sat a sealed envelope marked with our company logo. Michael slid it toward her without speaking, and she tucked it into her folder, glancing around before closing it. I recorded the exchange on my phone. Steady hand, camera focused on the envelope's red security stamp. Neither of them looked in my direction. Before watching the video, please tell us in the comments. Which country are you watching from? The restaurant was half empty, the air filled with the sound of low conversation and cutlery. I stayed behind a column near the bar, pretending to read a message. From my angle, I could see Michael reach for his glass and say something I couldn't hear. Laura nodded, checked her watch, and stood to leave. She passed him a small USB drive in return, sliding it under a folded napkin. The exchange was quick, efficient, and deliberate. When she walked out, Michael slipped the drive into his briefcase without hesitation. I waited until the waiter cleared their table before walking over. The check folder remained on the edge, partially open. The bill listed Michael's corporate account, signed with his distinctive angled M. I picked it up, folded it neatly, and placed it in my jacket pocket. The details, date, amount, table number, were exact. I left through the side exit, walked to my car, and saved the video to a secure drive. The recording was clean, no background interruptions. Back in the parking lot, I reviewed what I'd captured. The image showed both faces clearly: the envelope, the exchange of the drive, and the timestamp from the restaurant's camera in the reflection behind them. There was no ambiguity. The transfer wasn't casual or friendly. It was business disguised as lunch. I didn't need to know the content yet. The act itself was enough to raise questions. At the office the next morning, Laura greeted me with a smile and a coffee cup already on my desk. She said Michael wanted an early meeting about the upcoming bid presentation. Her tone was steady, her gestures practiced. I noted that her emails the night before had come from a personal address, not our company system. She left my office quickly, leaving a faint scent of perfume and a printed agenda with Michael's signature at the bottom. During the meeting, Michael discussed changes to the proposal, minor edits according to him. But the adjusted figures he mentioned matched the ones from my confidential spreadsheet. I hadn't shared that document with anyone. When I asked how he got the updated numbers, he said he'd received them from Laura during last night's review. The answer came too easily, too prepared. I nodded, made a note, and stayed silent. That afternoon, I cross-checked the proposal versions in our shared drive. Someone had accessed the confidential folder after midnight from a remote location linked to Michael's home IP. The log didn't lie. The same file had been copied, renamed, and uploaded again 6 hours later. I exported the access record and filed it in a hidden directory. The next day, Laura's calendar showed another off-site review with Michael. I didn't alert anyone. I only recorded the time, the location, and the details visible from the shared schedule. Every sign pointed toward coordination, not accident. The evidence was still incomplete, but the pattern was taking shape. I decided that collecting more proof would serve better than confrontation. When they both left early that Friday, I stayed behind, replaying the video again in silence. Each frame confirmed what I had seen with my own eyes. A clean exchange, one envelope, one drive, and no mistakes in the record. The following week began with small inconsistencies that didn't fit routine behavior. Laura's badge activity showed early entries and late exits. though her calendar reflected standard hours. When I reviewed building access logs, her credentials appeared twice in a single day. One entry at the main gate, another in the basement server room where she had no authorization. I downloaded the log sheet and printed the columns showing both timestamps. Michael's ID appeared within the same minute range. At work, Laura maintained her usual composure. She asked neutral questions about figures, occasionally stopping by my desk to clarify points she already knew. Her tone never changed, but I noticed she avoided eye contact when I mentioned confidential files. She began carrying her own laptop to meetings instead of the issued company one. When I passed her desk once, I saw an unfamiliar USB hub connected to her system. 4 slots active, all transferring data. She closed the lid immediately. Michael's behavior shifted as well. He canceled 2 team briefings and began sending instructions through private email rather than the internal network. The files he attached used titles identical to our project drafts, but with slightly different formatting. I compared both versions side by side, one from his email, one from the secured directory. The edits were too specific to be coincidence. Each revision reduced our proposed margin in favor of a competitor's range. That competitor, I later confirmed, was one of Michael's former clients. I reviewed the expense reports again. Laura's company card showed new entries at the same restaurant from the discovery day, each under client follow-up. The amounts varied, but always in pairs. 2 meals, 2 beverages, consistent tips. Her receipts were scanned into the finance system without verification signatures. I printed the set and added them to a growing folder on my desk. Over the next few days, I began mapping activity. Each instance where Laura met Michael outside the office preceded a policy change or data update that favored the external bidder. I checked document access logs across the shared server. Her username appeared multiple times on weekends when no one else was logged in. She explained it later as catching up from home, though our system restricted remote login during non-working hours. I verified through IT that her attempts came from an external network registered to a private address downtown. To test the extent of data movement, I inserted a small alteration into a live file, one easily noticeable to anyone reviewing the numbers. The next morning, Michael referenced that same altered figure during a staff meeting, quoting it as verified data. No one else had access to that file except Laura. That connection confirmed what I already suspected. The flow of information passed directly from her terminal to his. Outside of work, I kept my observations to myself. I didn't tell colleagues or friends. Every assumption required confirmation, and every fact had to be captured in writing. One evening, while leaving the office, I saw Laura in the parking lot, standing beside Michael's car. He handed her a document envelope through the half-open window. She glanced around, then placed it into her briefcase. The act was brief, deliberate, and free of hesitation. Back in my apartment, I reviewed each note and photograph. Patterns emerged like coordinates, consistent timing, identical handoffs, repeat transactions. I labeled the folder Chain Evidence and locked it in my desk drawer. Nothing yet justified formal reporting, but the sequence was tightening. One more confirmation and it would be complete. The next morning, I scheduled a quiet meeting with Sophia Reed, one of the IT compliance officers. I told her I needed internal trace verification for a project access audit. She didn't ask many questions. She simply opened her dashboard and filtered user activity logs. Within minutes, she confirmed multiple external connections to our financial proposal files, all from Laura's login credentials. Each access originated through a remote address traced to a residential network registered under Michael Grant's name. Sophia exported the raw data into a secure folder and sent it to me. I printed every line and added it to the binder already labeled Chain Evidence. By midday, I visited the accounting department under the pretext of reconciling project expenses. The system administrator provided digital copies of corporate card records. Laura's charges at the executive restaurant aligned perfectly with Michael's reimbursement entries marked as client engagement. I requested duplicate receipts from the restaurant for audit accuracy. The manager, unaware of context, printed them immediately. Each slip displayed the same seating area, the same date pattern, and consistent totals. The duplication left no gaps. The transactions were coordinated. That evening, I reviewed Michael's personal behavior inside the office. He had developed a habit of locking his office door during phone calls, though no company policy required it. Through the frosted glass, I could see him standing near the window, speaking in short sentences and taking notes on a yellow pad. When he left one day for a conference call in the lobby, I glanced through the open door. The pad on his desk contained figures identical to our internal draft's confidential forecast section. The numbers weren't public yet. I photographed the page and backed away without disturbing anything. I then designed a controlled verification test. Using a copy of the next client proposal, I created a decoy version titled Private, Not for Distribution. Within it, I placed one unique phrase written in plain text: Green Harbor Clause Adjustment Pending. That phrase had never appeared in any previous document. I uploaded the file to the internal server using my credentials and gave no one access. The goal was simple: track whether the phrase resurfaced elsewhere. Sophia agreed to monitor for any external metadata match. 3 days later, she called to report a result. The phrase, Green Harbor Clause Adjustment Pending, had appeared in a presentation file submitted by Michael's firm to a separate client. The submission timestamp followed my upload by less than 6 hours. The match was exact, character for character. Sophia ran a hash comparison and confirmed it had originated from my decoy document. That single result validated the entire sequence of suspicion. I printed the metadata verification sheet and signed it for record. The binder now contained physical and digital proof, receipts, access logs, recordings, and matching data strings. Each item was independently verifiable, leaving no room for interpretation. I avoided discussion with anyone else. Quiet confirmation held more power than accusation. At home, I reviewed the video from the parking lot again. The reflection on Michael's car window showed Laura handing over the same briefcase she carried daily. I zoomed in on the corner of the envelope inside. It bore the same corporate logo used for internal budget drafts. The detail was small, but irrefutable. By that point, the pattern was complete. Laura transferred internal material. Michael received it. Compensation moved through personal expense accounts disguised as client dinners. The evidence aligned like rows in a spreadsheet, neat, direct, final. I decided the next step would not be exposure alone. It would be structure, deliberate, legal, and absolute. If this were you, would you act or wait? Please tell us in the comment. By the next morning, every file and log aligned into one verifiable story. The decoy phrase had appeared in an external proposal from Michael's firm, the same document Laura had accessed from her terminal hours before. There was no plausible coincidence left. I printed the sequence of events, file creation, remote login, external upload, and numbered each step for clarity. Every timestamp matched perfectly. When I entered the HEO office, Laura was already there, seated at her desk, typing with deliberate focus. She looked up, nodded, and returned to her screen. Michael arrived minutes later, holding his phone and greeting staff in a casual tone. His confidence made sense now. He believed the system remained intact. I waited until both were in his office, door closed, before walking to compliance with the binder in hand. Sophia joined me, along with the internal auditor. I handed over the documents, video clips, and network logs. Sophia verified them line by line. The auditor compared the printed receipts and corporate expenses. When he reached the page showing Laura's signature next to Michael's corporate account, he underlined it once and said, "That's clear misuse." They both agreed to proceed immediately. I signed the witness statement and left them with the file. That afternoon, HR called Laura into a meeting room. Through the glass, I saw her seated beside the compliance director. She spoke quietly, her posture still composed. The conversation lasted less than 15 minutes. When she emerged, she walked past my office without stopping. Michael followed soon after, expression unreadable, escorted by a senior executive. Within an hour, both access credentials were deactivated. Security staff collected their badges and laptops. The process unfolded smoothly, procedural and quiet. Later that day, the compliance director briefed me privately. He explained that both employees had confessed to exchanging proposal drafts and accepting payments in exchange for early bid information. The USB drives and envelopes were confirmed as physical handoff tools. The company's legal team prepared immediate termination letters. Michael's name was removed from all current projects. Laura's email was disabled before the meeting even ended. The director thanked me for maintaining documentation accuracy. He said it prevented potential financial loss and reputational damage. His tone was neutral. Professional acknowledgement, not gratitude. I nodded, signed the confirmation sheet, and left. The evidence folder remained in the company archive, locked under compliance reference code. At home, I reviewed the events again, this time only to ensure no errors in documentation. Every entry in my notes corresponded to official confirmation. Each assumption I'd written had transformed into verified fact. I deleted the working copies from my personal drive, keeping only the video file on encrypted storage. The investigation was closed, but the outcome still lacked balance. Their dismissal ended the exposure, not the accountability. I sat at my desk, thinking through the structure of what came next. Michael and Laura had used insider information for profit. Their actions had cost other employees bonuses, delayed projects, and undermined trust. Their exit didn't restore that balance. I decided the next phase would ensure they faced consequences beyond termination. Professional, financial, and permanent. Quietly, with the same precision I had used before, I began mapping a plan that would remove every opportunity they had left. I met Sophia Reed in the compliance office to outline a controlled sting. She reviewed the evidence binder and confirmed chain integrity without comment. We agreed the next step required a seeded document and physical confirmation. I prepared a new file labeled Confidential Client Forecast Draft on a secured partition. Sophia embedded an invisible watermark that reported any external opening back to our server. We planned for the same executive dining room to serve as the meeting venue. I reserved a nearby table under a generic name to monitor the booth unobtrusively. Sophia arranged a silent remote monitor to capture any external access in real time. The objective was clear: capture both data transfer and a physical exchange, documented and verifiable. Back at my desk, I created the bait file with a deliberate, unique phrase. The phrase used two uncommon words that would be easy to trace exactly. I also altered a monetary figure in a way only my team would recognize. Sophia tested the watermark and verified remote alerts would trigger instantly. We agreed not to involve HR yet to avoid alerting Michael or Laura. Instead, we coordinated with accounting for later verification of any marked cash flow. The restaurant manager was contacted under the guise of a vendor dinner to allow photography. I configured a small camera disguised as a table centerpiece to capture hand-to-hand exchanges clearly. While preparing the bait file, Sophia reported a separate data point that changed everything. Her deeper log search uncovered payments routed to a shell company tied to Michael's corporate account. The shell entity used a different bank, but listed the same project code as our bid. Sophia exported bank transaction records showing multiple transfers disguised as consulting fees. The transfers matched dates when Laura had recorded client follow-up dinners in expense reports. She printed the transaction trail and attached it to our existing binder for legal use. The scope had moved beyond intellectual theft to suspected embezzlement and coordinated fraud. We adjusted the plan to capture both offenses without tipping either party off. The new bait included a fake invoice number matching the shell company's payment code. Sophia added an additional metadata tag that linked any download to bank deposit references. I coordinated with an external auditor who agreed to stand by review once alerted by our monitor. We also prepared a sealed legal brief ready to request immediate account freezes if accounts showed related activity. The restaurant layout was reconfirmed, and camera angles were finalized to include the service corridor. I rehearsed remaining steps silently, ensuring each action produced independent evidence. The final piece of the plan relied on a single meeting to complete the chain and expose the wider network. I arrived at the reserve table and took out the disguised camera. Sophia confirmed remote monitoring and watched our bait file open remotely. Laura entered first, carrying her usual black folder and smiling. Michael followed, briefcase in hand, moving with practiced, casual motions. She set the laptop on the table and opened the seeded draft. Sophia messaged. A download triggered from an IP linked to the shell. The server confirmed metadata matching the bait phrase exactly as embedded. Michael slid an envelope across, and Evan the manager accepted it. I zoomed the camera to capture the hand-to-hand motion clearly. Sophia uploaded the live feed to the external auditor for immediate review. The envelope contained a marked invoice matching the shell company payment code. Michael made a subtle gesture, and a server pocketed the cash envelope. Sophia traced a concurrent bank transfer to the shell company account. The auditor confirmed the transaction reference matched our bait file tag exactly. I recorded serial numbers from the cash envelope through the camera reflection. Michael exhibited no sudden movement. His actions remained measured and procedural. Laura signed a receipt placed on the table without looking up. Evan, the manager, counted the cash later and signed a daily log. Sophia exported bank records and attached them to the compliance folder. The external auditor advised immediate freezing of suspect accounts to prevent removal. We alerted legal quietly and prepared sealed requests for account intervention. Sophia submitted a signed affidavit with metadata and transfer chains attached. The bank complied and placed holds on the shell company's listed accounts. Michael's firm received a confidential notice requesting document preservation and audit cooperation. I remained at the table, watching every small motion until auditors arrived. An auditor entered, reviewed the footage, and documented envelope serial references. Legal served preliminary orders to freeze accounts and seize physical evidence immediately. Michael protested to no effect. His firm complied with preservation demands. Sophia handed me a labeled USB containing all live feeds and logs. The sequence now linked data theft to financial diversion through the shell entity. Accountant Daniel Price confirmed matching outgoing transfers traced back to Michael's approvals. Evidence showed routing through third-party vendors, then into the shell company account. The auditors prepared formal notices to regulatory authorities and internal stakeholders. HR suspended both Michael and Laura pending criminal referral and administrative action. The compliance folder now contained a full chain ready for external prosecution. I delivered copies of evidence to legal and saved originals in secure storage. The restaurant manager provided his register logs and CCTV footage without resistance. The external auditor notified the banking compliance desk and requested urgent action. Following protocol, the bank issued holds and flagged related wire transfers for review. The shell company account now showed immobilized funds that auditors documented meticulously. Michael and Laura were escorted from the premises by security officers after notices. Legal secured their devices and transported them to a forensic lab for imaging. Sophia coordinated with forensic analysts to validate file origins and transfer paths. The auditors began issuing subpoenas for additional bank records and vendor documents. Michael's firm announced immediate internal review and compliance overhaul in a statement. The Ethics Board opened an inquiry and requested temporary suspension of bidding privileges. I provided witness declarations and authenticated media to legal representatives on file. The bank froze outgoing transfers and began tracing upstream beneficiaries of funds. Sophia continued monitoring for any attempted asset movement or deletion of records. Everything moved through formal channels now, documented in duplicate for legal use. Days later, regulatory investigators arrived to review the compiled case evidence thoroughly. They took custody of bank statements, emails, and the live feed archive we supplied. Michael and Laura were formally notified of criminal referrals and potential prosecution. The firm suspended bidding privileges, while regulatory reviews and audits continued without pause. I met briefly with the auditors to clarify evidence chains and confirm signatures. They praised the methodical documentation, but emphasized independent verification remained necessary. Outside, media inquiries began, but legal limited disclosures to procedural statements only. My role remained factual: witness, collector, and supplier of verified records. The shell company account stayed frozen, while investigators followed the financial trail upstream. The execution phase concluded with formal legal custody of evidence and account immobilization. Would you call this act revenge or justice? Please tell us in the comments. The official investigation moved faster than expected. Within a week, both Michael and Laura faced formal charges under corporate fraud and breach of confidentiality statutes. The bank confirmed over 20 transactions between Michael's shell company and a private account in Laura's name. Each transfer matched a specific project milestone within our division. The figures aligned exactly with internal bid values, establishing direct correlation. Regulators froze both accounts pending trial, and our legal department initiated civil recovery proceedings to reclaim losses. Everything advanced through procedure, each step supported by verifiable evidence. Inside the company, immediate restructuring began. Michael's department was dismantled, its functions reassigned to separate managers. Compliance introduced new dual approval systems for all project files. The board circulated an internal notice praising Sophia's technical work and my report's precision. The tone of the memo was factual, detached, and brief, exactly how corporations acknowledge major disruptions. Staff whispered in the halls, but no one asked direct questions. Everyone understood silence meant stability. I maintained my routine, arriving early, leaving late, and keeping records current. Sophia sent updates daily during the legal transition. Each morning, she confirmed another confirmation letter or regulatory attachment added to the archive. The shell company's filings were found to include false invoices signed by Michael. Laura's name appeared as a contract consultant, though she never held that position officially. Their combined actions had redirected over $500,000 across 6 months. The auditor's report listed this amount under recoverable assets. None of it surprised me. The process was mathematical, not personal. One afternoon, I was called to testify before an internal review committee. The session lasted under an hour. I described only actions and timelines, no opinions, no assumptions. The panel chair thanked me for clarity and signed the transcript. As I left the room, I passed Michael seated with his attorney. He didn't look at me. His posture was controlled, but his confidence was gone. Laura sat in another chair outside, eyes fixed on a legal document she wasn't allowed to keep. The corridor was quiet, lined with frosted glass and reflected light. Everything about it felt procedural, not dramatic. By month's end, the regulatory body published a summary statement. Both subjects were found guilty of professional misconduct and financial diversion. Michael received a permanent ban from executive management roles and restitution orders. Laura faced lesser penalties, but lost professional certification. The shell company's assets were liquidated under court supervision, and recovered funds were redistributed to affected project accounts. No part of the report mentioned names beyond initials. Everything stayed within compliance language. Still, everyone knew. At home, I received a letter from corporate legal thanking me for cooperation. It included a brief statement about policy improvements resulting from the case. I filed it without reading twice. The binder that had started all this sat on a shelf in my study, spine labeled neatly, contents unchanged. I didn't open it again. The material now belonged to the company's record system, replicated and archived in multiple secure servers. My role as primary witness had ended. Sophia later transferred to another branch, her name added to the Internal Recognition Board for System Enhancement. I congratulated her in one short message. She replied with a single line, "Good work, all documented." That was her last message to me. The entire sequence, discovery, exposure, legal action, was now complete. No drama, no closure speech, just records and outcomes. When I walked past Michael's old office weeks later, it was empty, walls repainted, desk cleared. The plaque bearing his name had been replaced. The system continued, adjusted, corrected, and documented. 3 months later, the company completed its restructuring, and my transfer request was approved. I moved to a new regional branch in another city, a smaller office near the river. The pace was slower and the staff smaller, but the systems were stronger. Every access request required dual verification, every proposal carried encryption, and every manager followed chain of command validation. The case I had initiated became an internal benchmark for audit protocol. It existed now only in training material, stripped of names, dates, and emotion, reduced to procedure and lesson. In my new office, I unpacked little. A single laptop, a notebook, and one folder labeled Reference. Inside it, I kept a single printed receipt from that first restaurant. The moment where evidence began. Not as a reminder of betrayal, but as proof that accuracy outlives motive. The receipt carried no meaning beyond record-keeping. Over time, it became just another paper among others, yellowed slightly at the corners. That was enough. Occasionally, I received updates through official channels. The restitution payments continued as scheduled. The auditors tracked recovered assets monthly, and the compliance division issued a bulletin confirming all accounts settled. Michael's name never appeared again. Laura's record was closed, her professional license officially revoked. The report language remained technical, written without adjectives. The case had become data, its consequences absorbed into policy. I preferred it that way, neat, contained, final. On weekends, I walked along the river path near my apartment. There was a cafe at the corner with glass walls facing the water. People talked, ate, exchanged documents, and checked phones. I sometimes paused there, watching the repetition of ordinary behavior. The scene looked identical to how everything had started, yet nothing about it felt personal anymore. It was simply how business and routine overlap, agreements, trust, exchange. I understood then that patterns always exist, only documentation separates suspicion from proof. Sophia sent me a message one evening. It was brief. Training program published, compliance case study approved. She attached a copy of the first slide. The title read, Integrity Through Verification. I replied with a short acknowledgement. The message thread ended there. We hadn't spoken since the closure report, and there was nothing left to discuss. Everyone involved had moved on through structure, not sentiment. At work, younger employees sometimes asked about the compliance poster displayed in the hallway. It quoted a single line from the study. Truth recorded once does not require repetition. They didn't know where it came from. I never explained. I liked that anonymity preserved the lesson better than recognition could. The incident had already served its purpose. Policy strengthened, risk reduced, system secured. That was the only closure required. One morning, during a staff meeting, the regional director mentioned a new ethics policy derived from a previous internal audit event. He emphasized the importance of documentation, verification, and factual neutrality in all disputes. I noted the wording. It matched my original phrasing from the first report, though no one in the room knew it. I listened, nodded once, and returned to my notes. The lesson had completed its cycle, from observation to record to institution. At the end of that day, I cleared my desk and switched off the light. Outside, the river reflected the evening lights, moving steadily without sound or pause. Everything around me functioned as it should. Structured, recorded, predictable. I walked home with no sense of victory or loss, only completion. What would you have done differently? Comment your opinion below. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe for more real stories.